Alright, let's review what happened on this saw. It came in dead, and I really didn't do a good job videoing all this because I really didn't intend to video this at all. It was just something I had to do, but I realized it's actually a pretty significant saw. This one's been modified more to run better on things like start, restart, idle, just getting the carb to tune properly and things like that, than performance, although it does have a little bit of a performance hit. The things that this saw had wrong with it was, one, it had a couple stuck rings. They weren't generating a whole lot of compression. And it had a significant amount of dirt inside the motor. And I can't imagine why. So I got that all cleaned out, and then I scuffed it up with a ball hone, which you saw in the video, and put that cylinder back on, and then had a whole bunch of issues trying to get it to idle. Pulled off the carburetor and found that the diaphragm is just like a piece of cardboard. It's just very, very inflexible, which was part of the problem. And the other part of the problem was the metering lever on the inside of the carburetor, which also affects the mixture, had been kind of pushed in so it wasn't getting full travel. So that was one of the issues, which was one of the reasons why it was going a little bit lean on top. Now, this was the original ignition system that was in this saw. I replaced it with the new updated ignition system, and what's significant about that is it generates spark at a lower RPM, and the timing curve is slightly different, which enhances the starting on the X-Torq. So the new ones have it, of course. This was a 2010 version. It did not have it. So it's got a new ignition, it's got a changed carburetor, and the combination of the ignition and the carburetor completely changed how this thing deals with low RPMs. I replaced, this was broke, and this is what an OEM looks like. I had bought this brand right here online for a worm gear, and they actually come with the bushing and the washer, which is really kind of handy, but they didn't work. And the reason it didn't work was this dimension right here. The OEM is like 0.62. The one that came out of that was like 0.635. So when you put the clutch on there, it would bind up against this worm gear. It would just spin the worm gear with the clutch. So I took this, and I took the one that came out of the bag and just filed it till I got it down to the same dimension as the OEM worm gear, and it works now. And it also got the modifications that I do here, and I'm not going to articulate too much. Basically, there's one, there's one. So by letting raw gas air go into the straddle ports, this picks it up, and of course this picks it up, and this whole back side of the piston gets more lubrication. Right? The bottom end's solid. It's got a lot of time on it, but it's solid. Net is, it came to one of my guys for a very low price. He picked it up. It wasn't running right for him, and he sent it to me and says, "Can you make this saw run good?" And I said, "Well, I can make it run better, but being as an old saw, I'm not going to give it the big compression changes that I do." And you know, it's not about the bearings, it's about the magnesium in the cases. I had the helicoil, my God, like 5 of the screws on this darn thing. And I figured, you know, let's give this a nice mellow build, and we're going to go out and see whether or not it worked, to see if this is a nice, easy starting saw, you know, runs good enough to be interesting. But I think what I want to start addressing in the next couple of videos is the concept of a saw being judged a success or a failure by its day-to-day life, how it operates, how you interact with it as compared to how fast it'll cut a cookie. You know what I'm saying? You know, online we get so driven by the race crowd where it's about coming up with faster and faster and faster saws. And sometimes that's done at the expense of the day-to-day operation of the saw. And so I want to go kind of the other way, where we do smart, tactical changes to make it make a little more power. You know, a possible compression increase, maybe a muffler mod sometimes. And in this saw, actually a rehash of the whole intake. But the definition of win is it comes back to me next year for a tune-up with no major mechanical failures. And when the guy pulls it out of the truck, it starts every day, and it starts easily. It's easy to tweak and tune. It's not finicky on the carburetor. It's just a very simple saw to live with. That would be the definition of win. And on this saw, seeing as it's a 2010 saw, 8 years of logging use is a lot of time on a saw like this. If I can make this go for another 3 or 4 years with a couple $100 of effort, that's a big win to me. You know, that means the guy didn't have to spend $800 right now. He can wait to spend $800 after he's got a bunch more wood on the landing sold, and maybe 3 years from now he buys another saw, 4 years from now, and this one's still putting along. May not win any cookie races, but it's making money. And I think, again, the two concepts that I want to define as the definition of win is the longevity of the saw, but also just the day-to-day operation. How easy is it to live with? So anyway, I'm going to put a bar and chain on it and bring it out into the woods, and we're going to do some work with it just to make sure that it's stable, get it tuned and tweaked. It might be a little bit rich because we're going into winter, or we are in winter. Of course, it'll be fat for the summertime, but again, if it's not that finicky, you know, maybe it'll run good enough in the summertime. It doesn't have to be tweaked. Or when it does have to be tweaked, it's really easy to get to the right RPMs. That's the definition of win. Well, it's your typical December day. It's not that cold. It's probably, I don't know, in the 20s, high 20s, low 30s. I have a dead beach down there, and we're pretty close to the sugar shack, so this is pretty convenient. And I've got a bunch of test saws that I want to spend some more time with. And I want to pick up a little more on that theme of saws that are easy to live with. Some of the saws we have here on this trailer are not the easiest. I'm going to do some horse trading around on bars. I'm going to put this Forester on the test saw. This is that 372 X-Torq that I kind of did my mods on. And this is more about reliability than performance. You know, I've always been a little bit nervous about those. When I tear them down, I always see a little bit more wear in the back side of the piston, the intake side, than I do on other saws. So this is an attempt to solve that problem. If it happens to run a little bit better, you know, this is in the same theme as when I was modifying those 562s. Well, yeah, it's nice to get a little more performance, but if I can make them run a little better, last a little bit longer, and have them come back to the shop, you know, less often, that's the definition of win. And bottom end solid, so I didn't have to do anything to the bottom end much. But since now it's going to have my name on it, I figured I'd make it run a little bit better. And plus, since it's long past its service life, I don't feel the need to stay within OEM specs anymore. So I decided to do what I do to the intakes to make them idle a little bit better, run a little bit better, stuff like that. First thing I'm going to do is put a bar and chain on it. And the other saw that I have here is that one I ran, I don't know, about 400 yards west of here, up the hill. And this chain's got a little time on it, and I don't have a file, so it's just going to have to be the way it is. But it cuts wood still. This is that Husqvarma G372XT, whatever the heck they call it. But basically it's the 372 clone that has the high top versus the low top. And I had said before that I like the low top version better because it has a lot better plastic, and I have not changed my opinion. Although this one runs. So, and it ran pretty well. I have to say it ran pretty well. So some people are not going to care. This one here is that one I built on the X-Torq cases from a John's Thread 2166, and it's got the highway top end that's been decked in order to get more compression, and it's a pain in the neck to start, so it's not an easy saw to live with. It fails that test, but it sure makes good power. And last but not least on this set of saws for today is the 268 pop-up build in a OEM 2171 top end, which is the same as the 372 original edition. The 2171 was the John's Thread version of the original edition 372. So basically this here is the most OEM saw here. Its big claim to fame for me is it's one of those builds where I took a piston from a 268, machined a little off the crown of the piston around the outside so it would fit inside the combustion chamber of a standard cylinder that has not been touched and has not been decked, and it also has a base gasket. I think it's a legitimate build concept. What I want to focus on in the next couple of videos is the saws that are easy to live with day to day, and that's a combination of reliability on things like the controls, the choke levers. You don't want them popping off. You want to start easy, you want to idle, you want it to restart easy, changing the bar and chains. It's all those little things that you deal with every time you run the saw that I want to focus on this next set of saws. So to start it, let me see if I have any gas. I don't know how much I'm going to run this saw today, but if it has a little bit of gas in there, it does. It has maybe quarter tank. These three saws, this one, the highway, and the Husqvarma, which has that goofy freaking chain brake, and the blue saw have been out in the barn, well, out in the lean-to portion of the barn for the last snowstorm. So like the blue one's got ice stuck all over it. And the reason I'm doing that is not because I don't take care of my saws, is I want to put these saws through the kind of things that they're likely to see in their life, and just see how they react, and how does it affect me using it on a day-to-day basis. Of course, the most important component of that is, do they start? So let me start with this one right here and see how many pulls it takes to get it fired. Now remember, it's been sitting outside, so there's a good chance there's a little bit of ice and condensation if there's any moisture in the carburetor or gas tank. Alright, so I got that one started. I don't know if you can hear that. So we're going to try this one next to see how many pulls it takes to start this one here. This is the one that's a pain in the ass to start. We'll see if it's still a pain. what this is going to do in 3 pulls. It has gas in it. Okay, 4. Unreal. How do you argue with that? I need to give this a little more fuel on top. Well, it runs good, no doubt. I did that whole first section without the camera on, and it runs pretty good. I added a little more fuel to the top end, and I need to raise the idle just a little bit. Let's see if it restarts anyway. So let's go back up to the tractor and monkey with it just a little bit. But did that with it. I believe it's a successful build. It has really good power, and it really does idle well. So I got some dead wood in here that I need to take down. So maybe I'll do that once I tweak it a little bit and leave that one right on the trailer. I need to put some time on that saw right there to make sure it's right before I let it go. Well, what did I learn so far? One, it's a good idea to turn the camera on when you're doing stuff like this. You miss a lot of good stuff. Second is I do believe this is a successful build. It runs nice, and I got to raise the idle up a little bit, but boy, is that a change from where it used to be, where I always had to bring the idle down and play this real finicky game with a X-Torq carburetor to get the idle properly. This thing idles beautifully. Good power. Not quite as snappy as the original edition saw builds I have here, but just the same, it works. I have to say that I was not able to get this one here started. And that kind of brings to the forefront that whole concept I've been talking about, a saw easy to live with. Let's see what happens with this. Alright, we've gone through the first tank of gas on this saw. So I'm going to go fill it up and bring it back. That rotten old thing. Here, let me take away this little beach first, then I'll go fill it up. So here's our first restart on this after a refill. Boy, I wish I got it running on video more. This is a good running saw right here. Again, this is all OEM, and this is the one that has a gutted intake. So what did I learn today? I learned that this is a good build. It works quite well. You know, it starts and it restarts pretty easy, which is the definition of win for me. You know, it'll idle all day long, and it has decent power. I didn't run this today, but it did start, and I went through and started the other saws. One of them I couldn't start at all. That was the highway build, and the young fella came up who's a sub and had it lit off pretty quick. But you know, that's exactly the point. You know, an older fella, I'm a lot more interested in a saw that starts easily and operates, doesn't vibrate, than I am in a half second or a full second more in a cookie cut. So I'll pick this saw or this saw right here almost every time over the faster and bigger saws, just simply because they start easy, they don't vibrate much, and they don't have any little glitches in the way they operate. Now, this one no longer has some of the glitches that were associated with 372 X-Torques, you know, and yeah, it's a little heavier than the original edition. It's a good running saw, so if you got one, there's no reason to get rid of one. You can modify them to make them run quite well if you want to. And new, they run good, so just depends on what your priorities are. You know, on this saw here, it runs, but it's got goofy stuff going on, like that chain brake and just the little things like that. It started, but it took a while to get this one started as well. And I think the funny thing was, I threw it in the video, is that big blue thing started like 4 pulls. You know what I'm saying? So there's a big 90cc saw that is like $350, I guess, delivered. I don't know what they cost anymore. Now, that runs the way a 90cc saw is supposed to run and starts easy. That's a rare combination. All three of those: price, performance, and ease of operations. And I'll keep putting it in there, and every time I come out in the woods, I'm going to fire it up again. Now, I actually left these saws out in the trailer. We have a lean-to, so the freezing rain got in and covered up the blue saw. And on these, I broke some of it off. I left a little bit of ice on the blue saw so it would be on the camera. Just to kind of prove the point, that's the kind of thing that might happen. A guy leaves it out in the back of his pickup truck, can he get it started? And that blue saw, the answer was hell yeah. Didn't take any more pulls to start it after spending the night on the trailer in the weather than it did before. And of course, this saw here, the 372 with the 268 pop-up, that also started right up. It also had the same treatment or lack of treatment, lack of respect. But that, you know, let's try this again. This is my point. And I didn't even have to pull that hard. This saw works better than it did before I made the changes. Let me go out and see if it survives. And if it comes back with a blown up top end, and I can point to the modification as a reason why, that means it was not a successful build. But if they come back with another one of these X-Torques that was blown up and asked me to build it the same way, guess what? That means it's a successful build, doesn't it? So, that's it for today. Talk to you later. Bye for now.